Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala, amma ba'd. We're looking now from talking about what Ruqya is. You now know methods that you can use for performing Ruqya. You now know how you should be as an individual and how your patient should be as a person. So now we kind of come down to boil everything we've done down from the last day and a half into the actual Ruqya session itself. And let's split the Ruqya session into before, during and after. And there's no doubt that certainly the things we're going to mention here will give you an indication. They will not give you everything. Eventually, your experience and your learning and your seeking knowledge will continue to add to the information that you have that you're going to use in this Ruqya session. However, ya ikhwan, and I really want to emphasize this, I want you people sitting here today to practice Ruqya. I want you to go out and to give, to do and perform Ruqya upon people. I don't want you to leave this as, I heard some words about Ruqya and I learned a few things, and then go back and do nothing. I want you guys to get involved, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. And that might be in partnership with someone, that might be with your family, that might be beginning with your local area, because we are in desperate need of people who are going to take on this responsibility for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Before the Ruqya session, you're going to have a discussion with the patient. Before this, we talk about what this discussion might contain, and reminding you what we said about ordering the good and forbidding the evil. You may want to send your patient some information before they even come, or to have some information present on a website or on your Facebook or whatever before they even come, that sets out certain ground rules in order to come and join the good and to forbid the evil. So you say straight up, if you're going to come to me, my sister in Islam, you're going to come with hijab. And if you're not coming with hijab, then I'm not coming to do Ruqya on you. And you can put it nicer than that. But I'm trying to emphasize to you in a way that you are going to be ordering the good and forbidding the evil. And you're not going to be compromising, and you're going to be bearing in mind the information we've heard about the Raqi and the family. So before the session, and this is very important, manage your time. And I say this because this is something that I feel that I haven't done brilliantly in the past. You can get talking to someone about their experiences, and there's only 2 minutes left for the Ruqya, and you manage to read Al-Fatiha and they go. Why? Because the shaitan wants anything to delay, anything that the shaitan can do to stop you reading, any single method the shaitan can use to stop you reading, he will do so. And they can't do anything unless Allah Azza wa Jal wills for it to happen. So do manage your time. Set yourself an idea of how long you want the conversation to take. Some certain patients will talk forever. They will talk again and they will mention, and someone will come to you and say, some of these patients have been suffering for 20, 30 years. And they want to tell you what happened in that 20, 30 years. And that, for your purpose of your Ruqya, can mean that there is no recitation of the Quran. So the first thing I want to talk about before the session is give it a proper time. Have it in your mind that I'm going to chat to them. Get the important information out, and try to ask the questions that are the most pertinent, that are the most valuable questions to what you're going to do. Some of the ulama benefit this from the hadith of the hadith of the Tabi'i, which leads to the hadith of Ibn Abbas about those who do not seek Ruqya. When the scorpion stung that Tabi'i, and he said, the other one said to him, "What did you do?" Look at the value of the question. He was stung by a scorpion, and the Shaykh, he said, many people would say this, what color was it? Was it a big scorpion or a small scorpion? Really? Did it hurt? Did the poison go into you? What happened? Then what did you do with the scorpion? He's asking questions that have nothing to do with the issue. Look at the tabi'i, what's he want? He wants the ilm, shar'i, he wants the benefit. And he says, what did you do so that I can evaluate and advise you whether you did the right thing or the wrong thing? So ask valuable questions, insha'Allah ta'ala. Try to give yourself a bit of an idea. Of course, da'wah is extremely valuable, and you may begin a ruqya session with da'wah, and da'wah may be the only thing you deal with. Because at the end of the day, your calling them to tawheed is critical to their success and their cure. But we want generally if you extend this period, we want it to be extended because you wanted to extend it, not because the shaitan wanted to stop you from reciting. Okay? So if you decide to take the full hour or 2 hours to talk to them about tawheed, that's fine. But make sure that that's your decision. I'll give you a little tip about how to make sure these things are your decision. Try to decide things before the patient comes to you. And the only reason I say this is, the shaitan will come to you throughout the ruqya, try to get you to stop, oh, you're too tired, I'll just stop here. What I try to do is I have in my mind before the patient comes, at a time when inshallah the shaitan is less close and less likely to afflict me, I have in my mind I'm going to recite inshallah approximately this amount of the Quran. I'm going to take approximately this length of time. Just an approximation in your mind. Because if you have in your mind, inshallah, I'm intending to recite 1/3 of Surah Al-Baqarah upon this patient, then try to stick to it and don't let the shaitan stop you and say, oh, I'm really tired, I'll just leave it at the first page. Inshallah, next week we'll carry on. So be aware of that. Try before the session to focus yourself before you even see the patient. What am I going to ask? What do I need to know? Another technique for this is to have the majority of this discussion before the patient even comes to see you. Get them to write it down in an email. Get them to send you a message, a text message, whatever it is, so that you can get the majority of the time that you're with them to be the recitation of the Quran, calling them to the haqq. Yeah, you may talk to them in session, how long have you been suffering? You send some questions by email, they get back to you, you then send them some material, and you save yourself a whole lot of time. You also save yourself from having to remember everything in one go. So try, if you can, to extrapolate some of these discussions and make them happen by email or by phone. The reason I tell you this is, the shaitan is desperate to stop you from the performance of the ruqya, and some patients, there is no limit to the amount of information that they want to give you. And so you say in general, if it gets too long, Jazakallahu khairan, it's very beneficial. If you could write this down for me in an email, I will inshallah ta'ala look at it. Let's get on with the Quran. However, there are some things that you do need to focus on before you begin the session. Ask about the details. Ask how long they have been suffering. Ask about their history. This is just simple good practice. It's simple best practice. It's what a doctor would do. It's what anybody in this circumstance would do. Get a bit of history. How long have you been suffering for? What kind of symptoms do you have? Try not to prompt the person overly such that you put words in their mouth. A lot of ruqqa do this. So do you see dreams of snakes? I see dreams of snakes. Scorpions? Scorpions. Do you see this, that, the other? Did you possibly do this? Did you do this? And they're just basically deciding the issue beforehand. Try to you can prompt them from time to time. But when you prompt them, try to let them discuss what they're talking about and say what they want, and then ask certain questions. Okay, you mentioned that you have nightmares, and you mentioned that your nightmares are like this and this and this. Have you seen such and such a thing in your nightmare? So then you can get more specific. Okay? So, how long have you been suffering? When and how did it begin? When and how did it begin? Because you're trying to get a hypothesis in your mind, a basic prognosis, something that you can build upon and sort of adjust as you progress through your relationship with the patient. You may want to talk about yourself, your ground rules, certain things you want the patient to do. I want you to do these adhkar. I want you to do this and this and this. But when you do so, do not overburden the patient. Do not give them more than they can do. I was with Sheikh Adil Muqbil, hafidhahullah, and the Sheikh, he was advising people to do the adhkar, and he was only advising people to do a few short adhkar. And I said, Sheikh, Or one of the sisters asked from the sister's side, Shaykh, there are many other adhkar. Why haven't you told them this one and this one? Shaykh said, do not burden with people with things that they cannot do. To the point where you're asking them, I want you to do 30 minutes of dhikr after Fajr and 30 minutes after Maghrib. Because on the day when they have work and they can't spend 30 minutes, they won't do any. But if you give them 2 minutes to do, they will always do it bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. And the most beloved deeds to Allah are those that are continuous, even if they are few. So you're asking them, you may be telling them some things about yourself, reminding them about Tawheed and so on and so forth. You ask them about their history, when and how did it begin. You may ask them about their dreams. Dreams are something that it requires a great deal of care in. Because it's very easy to make mistakes when it comes to dreams, and it's very easy to let the shaitan lead you down a path. By the shaitan showing certain nightmares and falsehoods in dreams that you interpret in a certain way, and you base everything upon them, and then you completely end up as a puppet of the shaitan. And if Allah Azza wa Jal wills, inshaAllah ta'ala, I will bi-idhnillahi ta'ala deliver a seminar on dreams and dream interpretations, inshaAllah ta'ala. Not in terms of how you can be an interpreter of dreams, but the basic principles of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah regarding the interpretation of dreams. Those of you who speak Arabic, you will find on the website of Ansar al-Sunnah in Egypt a set of lectures by Sheikh Adil al-Sayyid, Hafidhahullah, on the principles of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah regarding interpreting dreams. And this is important, ya ikhwan. It's important that you distinguish between what the soul is telling them, what the soul is instructing them, or what the soul is inclined towards, the truthful dreams that are from Allah Azza wa Jal, and those evil dreams that are from the shaitan. But dreams do play a part, and you will develop your knowledge in this. In English, you may wish to read the book of Shaykh Muhammad al-Jibari, Hafidhahullah ta'ala, on dream interpretation. It is extremely beneficial and it will help you a great deal. Ask them if they have any ta'weed. Ask them if they've been to anyone else. This is not to set the ruqa against each other, to set the raqis against each other, that you and me are going to fight each other, don't go to this brother, you know, and so on and so forth, but simply for you to get an idea about the people they've been. Sometimes I get someone and he says, will you read on me? I say, okay, who have you been to? He says, I've been to Abu Ibrahim. So straight away, I want to ask our brother Abu Ibrahim, what did you do? Why are you not still going to him? Maybe the brother became busy, maybe something transpired, maybe there was something that the patient couldn't do, maybe they didn't like the advice that Abu Ibrahim wanted to give them and they didn't want to hear it and they just want to look around for a raqi until he gives them something that they want to do. Maybe they'll say, oh, I've been to such and such an imam and you know this imam is a magician or is someone who's involved in magic. Did he give you anything? Did he give you something to drink, something to wear? Oh yes, he gave me. Do you still have it? What have you done with it? And so you build up a history. With regard to the sisters, ya ikhwan, fitnatun nisa. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the greatest fear, or one of the greatest fears that he had, أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, is the fear of women. The fear for you of the fear of women. And the first thing to misguide the children of Israel was the fear of women. And as a raqi, you will soon learn that the majority of cases that you will deal with will be cases involving women in general, for a lot of the people who perform ruqya. And so you must set down your stall before you begin. You must set down absolute strict rules. You come with a mahram. I can't come with a mahram. Why? My mahram, he's busy. Come when he's not busy. The mahram will save you from so much evil. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. The mahram will save you from so many things and so many problems. Ya ikhwan, you don't need to stare at the sister. You don't need to look her in the eyes with a long soulful glance just to see whether you think you can see the ayn in there, or whether you think you'd like to marry her as well. Akhi, wallah, we might joke about it, but wallahi, how many ruqa we have seen with our own eyes and heard about with our own ears that have gone down this route. You don't need to stare at her. For me personally, one of the things that I do is I prefer to read on her from behind. So I would ask her to sit in front of me and I will keep more than an arm's distance. Why? Because it stops me getting the urge to go like this, from the shaitan or from myself. What's the ayah in Surah Yusuf? لا أبرئ نفسي. I don't claim that I myself am pure. I'm not going to say that I myself are pure and holy and I would never dream. I'm going to put the asbab, I'm going to put those causes there. So I'm going to sit a little bit further than an arm's length so that I'm not going to jump over. And I might go up to her and read in her ear at some point. But in the beginning, I'm just going to set my stall out. I'm not looking at her unless I need to look at her. Sure, if something's jumping around, I might look at that place where it's jumping around. But in general, I'm going to keep a general observation without me staring at her. You could ask the mahram. The mahram say, look, keep an eye on her. If you see something, let me know. Give me a shout if I miss something. You're being commanded to lower your gaze. Don't make ruqya the exception to the rule. If you need to look, you need to look. But what is need, ya ikhwan? What is darura? Darura is eating the meat of a pig. Darura is eating the meat of a pig because there's nothing else there to eat. You're going to die. Darura is not pork is cheaper than chicken, so I'm going to buy pork today. Darura is not snipe me up a nice fat bacon sandwich with loads of ketchup on there because I just really want to enjoy the bacon that I'm eating. If you were eating pork, you would eat the minimum that you need to eat and you would almost be disgusted by it to the minimum extent that you had to just to keep yourself alive. This is darura. Darura is not, okay, sister, sit down, let me put my hands on you, let me have a look at you. Don't worry about that hijab, it's not majorly important. This is what we are seeing from so many of the ruqas, so many people. If you have a female relative like a mahram with you as well, that assists you, this is one of the greatest things that the women can do in ruqya. And in general, a woman, in jihad fi sabilillah, we advise that, in general, that the women have a different role to play. But one of the major roles that the women have to play in ruqya, and there are some women who are able to do ruqya like men are, but in general, one of the major roles the women have to play is assisting and supporting. Have a sister there to correct that girl's hijab. Have a sister there to look after her. Someone who's a mahram for you, who's there, who's going to sort of look after her and make sure she's okay and keep her covered and keep an eye on you. Because trust me, you're not in front of your wife, you're not going to do anything. If you don't fear Allah Azza wa Jal, then at the minimum you're going to fear her, subhanAllah. So, try your best. It's not always possible, but keep that fear of Allah as being the primary thing. Bring her mahram with her. If you can't bring her mahram with her because she's a revert sister, she hasn't got a mahram at all, she doesn't have anyone who can be with her, then at least make sure there is no khalwa. Make sure there's another sister comes with her from her side. And try to have someone from your side as well. Why would you have someone from your side? To make sure that if there are any accusations of something improper, that there is someone with you who can back you up. It's not common, but it does happen from time to time. Some people have illnesses and diseases in their hearts, and they'll say this happened and that happened, and it's useful for you to be able to cut that door for the shaitan and say, Alhamdulillah, I have myself a ruqya partner. It's not always possible to have a ruqya partner, but it's nice when you do have one. They remind you of what you forget. They correct you if you make a mistake in the Quran. They support you, they help you, they stay with you. They look after when you want water bringing, they bring it for you. And you swap over when your voice is hurting, they'll recite for a bit. It's lovely to have a ruqya partner, and it's really useful in times when you've got a new patient, you don't know, because you don't know what might be accused, male or female. It's good to have a ruqya partner with you if you can. It's not always possible, and if it's not possible, trust in Allah Azza wa Jal. But this sister who she doesn't have a mahram for whatever reason, then the minimum that you need to do is to bring a trustworthy sister with her. Not another little young girl who you might like to marry as well, but a reliable sister, one of the aunties, one of the elder sisters, or one of the sisters who's known for her responsibility and she's known for her fiqh in the deen. Because this is going to keep you further away from falling into sin and from falling into that which is going to ruin your ruqya and ruin your success in what you're doing, because Allah Azza wa Jal is not going to give you tawfiq when you are disobeying Him in this way. And it gets like a disease, it gets worse and worse and worse, until the Raqi says, I only read on women. And send me a photo first and I'll tell you if I'm going to read on you or not. Wallah, I'm not telling you something that's never happened, ya ikhwan. Wallahi, I'm not telling you something that's never happened. I'm telling you things that we have heard of, that we have seen, that we have witnessed, that we have read about, that we've seen with brothers on Facebook and elsewhere, stories from patients. it has got to this stage, ya ikhwan, fear the fitna of women and stick to the limits set by Allah Azza wa Jal. Ask them about their prayer. If they're not praying, you have a major issue you need to deal with first. And for me, I divide patients into categories according to the severity of what they're suffering. And from the most severe of patients that I consider to be the most deserving of treatment are those who have been told that they're going to die. So those who are being told that they're critically ill and they're going to die, you're going to give them priority. Those who are not praying or not practicing the deen at all, because if they die in this state, they die upon other than Islam. So you are not going to say to someone who says, oh, you know, you read Quran, I had a light headache, and otherwise I was fine, and I can read Quran on myself, and you have another person who the doctor's given a week to live. Judge it and give priority to those people. Maybe you might want to set out at this point your stall with regard to your commitment. And honestly, I advise you, ya akhi, don't promise them. Don't promise them the earth. Promise them that you will do the best for them that you can do with the circumstances that Allah Azza wa Jal gives you. Because subhanAllah, it sometimes turns out that the person will say, you promised me that you would be with me until it went, and Allah Azza wa Jal puts a difficulty for you in this. So be careful before you make this commitment, and try to advise people that, look, what I'm doing for you is I'm going to do the best that I can for you. I'm going to read on you today. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, I will continue that for as long as Allah Azza wa Jal gives me the ability. But your trust is in Allah. And so if Allah Azza wa Jal does not give me the ability to continue, at least Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put someone in your path who will be able to do that for you. Questions linked to the situation, and sometimes these questions can give you a very good idea of what the person's suffering from. You've got a lot of knowledge now about ayn, about sihr. Has this been done? Did you go to this person? Was there an amulet? Did it have this on it? You can start to ask very pertinent questions to the situation. So I'm going to pass the mic over to our brother Abu Ibrahim, inshaAllah ta'ala, if he has anything to add on that part and to take us through the beginning of the recitation and what you're going to do during the session, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Okay, so our beloved brother, hafidhahullah, he's taken us through before. So now you are prepared. You are prepared, and now we are getting to the actual session. The actual session of Ruqya, and really this is, subhanallah, like we've mentioned, really we're reaching the peak now of this session of our conference. This is what it's all boiled down to, and the knowledge that we have sought, everything else. This is where your aqeedah, this is where your tawakkul, this is where your ilm, everything now is coming together, and you're going to see it now bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. The first thing is, during the session, you need to go into the session with the correct attitude. You yourself need to go into the session with the correct attitude. Make dua. Make dua before you go into the session. Humble yourself before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make tawbah, make istighfar before you go into the session. Now, the patient has arrived and we're in the session now. And as our brother has mentioned, perhaps they have a lot of details that they want to talk to you about. You need to limit this now. You need to be in control of the conversation. You're asking the questions without leading them on. Now, do you want this patient to sit down, or do you want this patient to lie down? Is this patient going to sit down, or are they going to lie down? And are they going to sit in a place where there is impending danger? If this person is possessed and suddenly they jump up, are they going to hit their head on something sharp? If suddenly they fall back, are they going to bang their head on something? If suddenly they make a dart for you or a dart for something else, are you prepared? So make sure that your environment is one which is safe. Make sure that there is a safe environment in which to do the ruqya. Make sure that it is an environment where you're not going to be constantly disturbed. There shouldn't be children running around. There shouldn't be phones going off in the background. There shouldn't be children screaming or people talking over. Make sure that the environment is one which is conducive to ruqya. This is extremely, extremely important. Now, with the sisters, I advise that the sisters are not made to lie down, simply because of exposing their body, etc. It's probably better that the sisters are made to sit down. If you do want the sister to lie down, perhaps have a thin blanket or a thin veil that you can throw over the sister so as to preserve the shape of her body so that it covers her. You can't see that. Again, for your protection and also for the protection of the sister from the whisperings of the shayateen. When the Quran is recited, make sure that you tell the patient, make sure that you tell the mahram, make sure that you tell your ruqya partner, do not play on your phone, do not talk, do not come in and out of the room needlessly. Make sure that when the Quran is recited, that the people are listening. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions when the Quran is recited, listen it attentively, in order that you may receive mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can we expect to have the mercy and shifa from Allah when you're talking over Quran, or you're reciting and that person is playing on their phone, laughing and joking on WhatsApp, Facebook, whatever it might be? Make sure that everybody in that room is listening to the Quran. Make sure that they are listening to the Quran. Now, we can start with those ayat or those surahs that our brother mentioned. So, Surah Al-Fatiha. So first, make or seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. And then, the Basmala. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. What we are doing now, it is in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, you can start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Start with those surahs which are mentioned in the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Recite this 3 times, 7 times, or an odd number if you want to read more than that. Then you can focus on Ayatul Kursi. Focus on Ayatul Kursi. Recite this as many times as you like. Again, 3 times, 5 times, 7 times, an odd number of times. Then you can recite the last 2 ayahs of Surah Al-Baqarah. Aman al-Rasul. You can recite this again 3 times, 5 times, 7 times. And again, ya ikhwan, we need to point something out here. For us, if somebody comes and says, recite this 7 times, don't recite it less than that. We need to say to them, bring a proof. Because for somebody to say to you, recite something a certain number of times, you need to have an evidence for this. You need to have daleel from the Quran and the Sunnah that you need to put a number onto something. There needs to be an evidence for this. So I'm just saying recite something an odd number of times, but from experience, if you start reciting 15, 17, 19 times, it's going to become very difficult for you. You're not going to be able to cover all of the different surahs if you're reciting every single one 21 times, You're going to have a session that lasts you 5 hours. So this is why we say 3, 5, 7 or more than that. But this is for you to judge as you become more experienced, as you gain in knowledge as to what works for you, what doesn't work for you. You can tailor your ruqya session to yourself. Every single raqi has his own methodology, has his own unique way. But again, we focus on the Quran. We mention those surahs which the Prophet ﷺ mentioned. So we focus on the last 2 ayat of Surah Al-Baqarah. Then, if you wish, you can then go to Surah Ikhlas, Surah Falaq, Surah Nas. Surah Ikhlas, Surah Falaq, Surah Nas, reciting them 3 times each. Now, at this stage, the patient may be sitting there and there's nothing wrong with them whatsoever. Does this mean there's nothing wrong with them? Does this mean there's no sihr? Does this mean there's no jinn or evil eye? No. It does not mean any of that. It does not mean any of that. Sometimes you'll recite Surah Al-Fatiha, by the time you get to إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ, this person is having a fit. But sometimes you'll have recited everything that we've mentioned, and subhanallah, there appears to be no reaction, no apparent reaction. Again, ya ikhwan, this does not mean that there is no jinn present, there is no sihr, there is no evil eye. It's extremely important to mention this. Now, you've recited these things. Now, we go on to the second category of the ayat that our brother Hafidhahullah he mentioned. those which have a clear purpose. So those ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions sihr. So for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah, the 102nd ayah, Surah Taha, Surah Yunus, Surah Al-A'raf, all of these are surahs where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions sihr. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. We looked at this ayah yesterday, and we looked at 5 points of benefit that can be gained from this ayah. قُلْ أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ أَنَّهُ اسْتَمَعَ نَفَرٌ مِّنَ الْجِنِّ. This is about the jinn now. So we've talked about the ayat of sihr. Now let's talk about those ayat pertaining to the jinn. Pertaining to the jinn. Those ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're reminding the jinn now. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. You're reminding the jinn now. You were created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those ayat referring to, Tawheed, referring to the oneness of Allah, referring to the purpose of creation, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala challenges mankind and the jinn in Surah Rahman. Ya ma'ashar al-jinn. Go past the boundaries of the heavens and the earth, or the boundaries of the heavens. But you're not going to be able to do that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala challenging us. This is for us to humble ourselves. But all the while, ya ikhwan, you as Iraqi, you need to be calm. You need to be composed. You should not be panicking. You should not be outside of your comfort zone visibly. Subhanallah. Why? Why, if you start panicking, this is what's going to happen. The patient is going to think he doesn't know what he's doing. He is as out of his depth as I am. If you yourself are panicking and visibly you're shaking and trembling, etc., the patient is going to lose all trust in you. Imagine you go to the doctor and you tell the doctor about your illness and the doctor faints. Subhanallah. Are you going to have any trust in this doctor? No. You're going, this man doesn't know what he's talking about. So subhanallah, keep yourself calm, keep yourself composed. If there is jinn and the jinn sees you panicking, the jinn sees you losing composure, the jinn knows now, I can scare this one, I can threaten this one, I can intimidate this one. You need to be calm, composed. What does this come from? Your aqeedah. Nothing is going to harm me or befall upon me except what Allah has written for me. Nothing is going to benefit me except what Allah has already written for me. Complete trust, reliance in Allah. So be calm, be composed. So you are reciting these ayat now of sihr. You are reciting these ayat now of sihr. And again, there is no real reaction. Does this mean that there's no sihr? No. Does this mean that there's no jinn? No. And then you go into the third category. You recite whatever you like. All of the Quran is shifa. If you want to go back to Surah Fatiha, go ahead. If you want to go to those to the azkar mentioned by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, go ahead. Recite whatever you like from the Quran, from the Sunnah which is authentic from the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, let's look at some details now. Let's go into some details now. You begin reciting. You begin reciting and immediately this person, they begin to fit. They begin to start having fits. They begin to tremble. They begin to sweat. They begin to tell you stop reciting. They begin screaming. Is this a particular link to sihr? Is it a particular link to jinn possession in and of itself? Or is it a particular link to ayn? Again, now we have seen that there is a reaction. What do? Do we stop now and say, what's going on? How do you feel? Why are you here? No. Continue with the recitation. You have established the first point now. The Quran is causing some discomfort. The Quran is causing a reaction now. So what do? You continue, you increase in your recitation of the Quran. Now you are focusing on the ayat of sihr. You are focusing on the ayat of sihr. And when you are reciting Surah Fatiha, you're reciting Ayatul Kursi, you're reciting the last two of Surah Baqarah, there is one reaction. But now you focus on the ayat of sihr. And subhanallah, when you start focusing on the ayat of sihr, this person begins to go wild. You notice that the ayat of sihr, they are having a different effect to the ayat or the general ayat mentioned in the sunnah. Subhanallah. Now we are, as the brother mentioned, we are beginning to form a theory in our mind. I'm reciting these things. When I recite the ayat of sihr, I get a much more pronounced reaction. I get a much more pronounced reaction. Two things to be wary of now. Do not jump to sihr. Do not jump to try and diagnose this. Why? Because it may be that the shaitan is trying to mislead you. It may be jinn possession. And the jinn, when you are reciting the ayat of sihr, increases in its reaction to try and mislead you, to send you down the path of sihr, when it's actually the jinn is in love with this person. So be very careful. Be careful of the shayateen trying to mislead you. And the second thing, do not jump to a diagnosis, rather continue with your recitation. Now if you've done all of this, ikhwan, and you've recited for like an hour and you haven't seen or heard anything, does this mean that there is nothing going on? Does this mean that there's nothing going on? No. What this means is that you need to continue and increase in your recitation of Quran. Sometimes the jinn is present in that person's body, but it's hiding. It's trying its best to try and hide from you. It's doing its best to keep itself concealed. Because if it knows that if it openly comes out, then khalas, it's been caught, there's no way out now. So it tries to hide within this person's body. Some things to look out for. Is there any twitching going on? Sometimes you're reciting and there's no real reaction except for a minor twitching of the finger. All you can see is the finger is just moving up and down, or there's a bit of twitching in the shoulders or in the face or in the neck. When you see this twitching, then grab it. When you see this twitching, then grab it. Make sure, ya ikhwan, that you focus and you are aware. This is why we said the raqi, he needs to be aware. He needs to be aware. But ya ikhwan, when you grab this finger, do not grab this finger and twist it back until it breaks. And your argument is, I'm causing harm to the jinn. No, be very careful. If you take a knife and you chop his head off and say, I killed the jinn, you've also killed the patient as well. So use pressure or use force within its correct, within its correct limits. If you take a baseball bat and you start breaking his ribs, when he comes back, he's going to have broken ribs. If you break his arm, when he comes back, you will have broken his arm. So be very careful, ya ikhwan. We have these people, they go overboard in beating. They go overboard in putting pressure, physical pain upon the jinn. Just know its limits. As we've mentioned, the backbone, the main core of our treatment is what? It is the Quran. It is the Quran. If this Quran was sent on a mountain, the mountain would turn to dust. If you stood on a mountain, would the mountain turn to dust? No. What's more powerful? The Quran, by the permission of Allah. Use this as your core treatment. And these are just things to try and cause a bit of excess. Like the cherry on top of the cake, shall we say. This is just a little bit on top. It shouldn't be your main thing. Do not put pressure or do not be touching up on the sisters. Again, fear the fitna of the women. If I see that woman's hand is twitching, I will say to her mahram, grab her hand and squeeze. Grab her finger and squeeze. I don't need to touch. I can say to the one who has accompanied her, this is why he's here. So I don't need to touch. This is why he's here. So I don't need to put pressure on. Say to the mahram, you do it on my behalf. Okay, this is extremely important. And if you see, subhanallah, do it lightly. If you do it lightly and you get it wrong, then no matter. But if I come with like if I have a fork and this person's finger is twitching and I stamp the fork in his finger, I've caused him some pain now, subhanallah. Shaitan is going to use that against me. He doesn't know what he's doing. This Raqi doesn't know what he's doing. Go and find somebody else. He doesn't need to hit you. Shaitan is going to use your ammunition against you. Whereas if I grab it lightly and I squeeze and I don't get a reaction, alhamdulillah, I haven't made myself look like a fool. Okay? So just lightly. There's no need for excess pressure. There's no need for excess beating. Anything else on this with regards? What to do if the jinn speaks? Okay, so now we are reciting and the jinn begins to speak. It is a woman and a very deep man's voice begins to come out of her mouth. Okay? Ya ikhwan, when I tell you these things, you're probably sitting here thinking, subhanallah, and you feel some element of fear. When you're in this situation, wallahi, Allah gives you this tawfiq, you feel no fear whatsoever. You will not, I promise you, when you're in this situation, you're immersed in it, you feel no fear whatsoever. So many people who've accompanied me with Ruqya, we've got the brother started in Ruqya, when you say these type of things, they say, subhanallah, you know, when you were explaining it, I felt a bit scared. But when I was in that situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just guides you. You are mujahid fi sabilillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show you a way out. You don't fear an ounce of fear. You will not feel an ounce of fear, I promise you. And if you begin to feel some fear, just control it. قُلْنَا لَا تَخَفْ إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْأَعْلَى. We said to Musa, do not fear, you are going to be victorious. You have the Quran, you have Iman, you have Tawheed, you have reliance in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first thing, do not become scared or do not panic. Do not stop your recitation of the Quran. If the jinn speaks and the first thing that you do is, oh my God, what's going on? Then the jinn knows. The jinn knows now, this is what I'm going to get him by. Every time he recites and you know I feel some pain, I just got to speak and he's going to get scared. No, whatever you do, do not stop the recitation. There may be external jinn. Perhaps cushions are moving themselves around the room whilst you're reciting. Perhaps the door is banging whilst you are reciting. The last thing that you should do in this situation, ya ikhwan, is stop. Continue with the recitation. Make sure that the person is safe, the person is sound. What should you do in this situation? Now the jinn is speaking. Like our brother has mentioned, the main thing, the jinn will do anything, the shaitan will do anything to stop you from reciting. So please do not get involved in long drawn out conversations with the jinn. Do not get involved. Make this one of your principles. I will not get involved in long conversations with the jinn, except with one purpose, which is to leave this person's body. Leave this slave of Allah. You are oppressing him. Fear Allah. If you don't leave, we are going to kill you. Keep your statements short and snappy and don't get involved in long conversations. Because what are you doing? When you're speaking, what are you not doing? You're not reciting. So when you're not reciting, what are you doing? You're allowing your enemy time to recover. Imagine you're in a boxing match and you've given this guy a haymaker and he's completely dazed. What are you going to do now? How are you feeling, mate? You okay? Did you feel it? No. You're going to keep beating him and beating him and beating him. And you're going to beat him until he's down and out. The same thing with the shaitan. Once you've got it to the situation where it's tried to hide in his body, but you've burnt it with Quran, it can't hide anymore. You've caught it moving through his body. You've pressed that part of the body. You've caught it now in his neck. You've caught it in his finger. And it starts to speak, now leave me alone, please don't kill me, etc., etc. Are you now going to give it respite? Are you going to give it the chance? No. You order it, you say, look, I don't want to oppress you. I'm warning you, if you do not leave, we are going to kill you by the permission of Allah. We expect reward from Allah. Allah says, فَقَاتِلُوا أَوْلِيَاءَ الشَّيْطَانِ. You are from the awliya of shaitan because you are oppressing him. You are causing harm to him. You are trying to mislead him. You are trying to kill him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward me yawm al-qiyamah. I'm not afraid to kill you bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Don't spend ages talking about Illuminati, talking about the Freemasons, talking about Iblis, talking about all of these different things. Ikhwan, I promise you, if you started right now, you could keep talking to this jinn until Fajr time. And it wouldn't stop. Why? Because while you're talking, you're not reciting. Do not take anything that jinn tells you as the truth. Rather, take it with a huge pinch of salt. If it agrees with the Quran and the Sunnah, we agree with it. But if it is something that is not mentioned, we do not affirm it, nor do we deny it. Okay? But you shouldn't be getting involved in this level of depth of conversation. Don't ask them, tell me what are your different tribes, what are your different clans, etc., etc. I'll mention to you, there's a video on YouTube and this brother has put the video up and it said, the grandson of Iblis. The grandson of Iblis possesses this man. And the video, all he has done is lots of speaking to the jinn, and the jinn says, I'm a Muslim, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the Iblis's grandson, I've possessed him, this is my name, blah, blah, blah. That brother came to visit me, we began reciting, the jinn began to speak. I said, you're thick. Did you think that we would think that you are the Iblis's grandson? He said, yeah, that boy is easy to fool. Referring to the other Raqi, he just takes everything. Just speak. Ya ikhwan, do not engage in excess conversation with the jinn. You need to command the jinn to leave. Command the jinn to leave the body. Leave his body. Why are you here? What do you want with him? Leave his body. And if it's a Muslim, then you tell them to fear Allah. And if it's a non-Muslim, you tell them to fear Allah. You remind them that they were not created without purpose. Again, enjoining the good, forbidding the evil. But to a limit. Do not think that you are the Zakir Naik of the Muslim world. Do not take it upon you to give da'wah to the jinn. Because honestly, ya ikhwan, you will misguide yourself. You cannot see them. This is something of the unseen. So we only say what we need to, and we don't go further than that. Leave his body or I will kill you bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Whatever you do, ya ikhwan, do not ever make a pact with the jinn. Do not ever seek assistance from the jinn. Never call upon the jinn. Never call upon the Prophet ﷺ or any other pious people or anything like this. Again, comes back to our aqidah. He says to you, and he offered our brother Muhammad, Hafidhullah, I will give you women and I will give you wealth. And we were there, subhanallah. They will say anything and everything. But subhanallah, as our brother did, Hafidhullah, he reminded him, what is with Allah is better. What Allah can give me is better. I do not want what you think you can give me. Rather, everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some other things that the jinn might do, he might begin to threaten you. I know where you live. I'm coming for you. If you don't stop reciting, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill your children. I'm going to kill your wife. I know about you. I know your secrets. Everything. The threats are endless. You will hear all manner of threats. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. You say, yeah, no worries. Don't worry. Carry on. And you just carry on with your recitation. Don't take any notice of them whatsoever. Why are they threatening you? Again, what's the aim and the objective? Is that you stop the ruqya. Never become scared. Always, ikhwan, remember this principle. When I go into a ruqya session, what Allah has written for me is going to happen. What Allah has written and it's not going to reach me is not going to happen. Everything is written by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this jinn says to you, yeah, I'm going to harm you, I'm going to do this. You say, no problem. You do what you can. You will not be able to do anything except what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows you to do. Now, sometimes you may want to ask the jinn, why are you there? But don't ask this at the beginning, you know. Sometimes you'll get to such a situation, you have recited and you have burnt the Quran, burnt the jinn, and the jinn is in a desperate situation, and so the jinn will tell you, I'm here through sihr, I'm here because I love him, etc. Again, do we take this as fact? No. If the jinn wants to tell you, then just accept it. But don't take this as fact now, khalas, this is the truth, and you tell the person afterwards, you have magic, you have this, the magic is in such and such a location, such and such a location, and the person says, how did you know? And you say, oh, because the jinn told me. Subhanallah. How did you seek clarification of this? Allah says, if an evildoer comes to you, seek clarification of that which he says. If he comes to you with some news, seek clarification. We cannot seek clarification, so we neither affirm it, nor do we deny it. With regards to touching the sisters, I want our brother Muhammad, Hafidhullah, to mention this in a bit more detail, inshallah.
طيب, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Some of the ruqa, they are very free when it comes to touching women, as we mentioned. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, for an iron nail to be driven through your skull is better for you than for you to touch a woman who is not permissible for you to touch, or as he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For an iron nail to be driven through your skull is better for you than this. Some of the Raqis, they will turn around and they will say, Ya Akhi Muhammad, you've made a mistake in this because this is darura. what do we say to them? We say to them, Ya akhi, darura is eating pork. This is darura. Meaning you do it to the minimum that you need to do to live. So bearing in mind this issue of darura and necessity, when would we or when might we consider or when might we need to or when might it be a necessity for us to touch a woman in ruqya? I have three situations or three broad circumstances in which you would consider it to be a necessity for you to touch a woman in ruqya. But there is a supplementary point to make on this, and that is that if there is a mahram there that can do it, you never need to. If there is a mahram there that can do it, you never, ever, ever need to. But we are talking about three circumstances when there is no mahram or the mahram is unable, and that has happened sometimes. The jinn is incredibly strong and the mahram is just being thrown against the wall. You may at that point need to make a judgment call. And I will, before I mention these three conditions, I will mention to you again. Every time this happens to me, I sit with my ruqya partner and I say to him, advise me, Ya akhi al-kareem, did I go too far? Did I touch her when I didn't need to? And we have a discussion afterwards where we evaluate whether or not this was necessary and whether or not we need to change our practice. Could we have avoided it? For example, sometimes in the way that you have the woman sit, you could have avoided her getting up and punching her mahram in the face. For example, you could have stood in a way to block her that you didn't need to touch her. So two preconditions. One is that when the mahram is there, you never, ever, ever need to touch the woman. There's never a necessity. How can there be a necessity when there's someone stood next to you? That you're just going to buy pork because it's £2 cheaper than chicken. That's all you're doing. Secondly, always take yourself to account. If you did something that was haram in the religion because it was a necessity, take yourself to account. Ask yourself, evaluate yourself afterwards. Could I have avoided this? Is there something I could have done? What are the three conditions or the three situations? Two of them are very easy and one of them is a bit of a grey area and it requires a bit of fiqh and a bit of knowledge. Regarding the two that are easy, the most important reason why you would touch a woman who is not your mahram in ruqya is if she tries to self-harm. I'm not talking about just starts to scratch herself. She runs for the kitchen knife and she goes to stab herself. She grabs something and she goes to choke herself to the point where you see that she's unable to breathe and her face is going blue. In this case, do not hesitate. If the mahram can't deal with it, get involved. Get hold of the mahram, get him to do it. If he can't do it, you get involved and you take her hand away so that she can't harm herself. The second circumstance, if she runs at you and she tries to attack you. This is necessity. She comes at you and she starts to put her hands on your neck and she starts to throttle you. It doesn't happen very often. But when it does happen, you're not going to stay there and say, oh, subhanallah, I can't touch you, you're not my mahram, please continue to strangle me. You can take her off to the extent that it's necessary, ya ikhwan. You're eating pork to the extent that it is necessary. Okay, the pork thing helps because none of you would sit there just chewing away on a bacon sandwich, yeah? You understand what necessity is. She attacks you, you restrain her comfortably. It's so important, ya ikhwan. Brothers and sisters, when you are dealing with a patient, go and speak. We have a brother with us, and mashallah, tabarakallah, the brother has some experience in, shall we say, fighting and these kinds of things. And he's benefited me a great deal in how to safely restrain somebody. Keep the person safe. Don't let them choke on their own tongue. Don't let them, hurt themselves. They start punching themselves in the face. You don't, subhanAllah, the way you hold somebody, and I'm not an expert in this, but someone with very little strength can restrain somebody very effectively. The brother advises, for example, that you control the joints and you keep a bit of pressure on the person's shoulder so that they're not able to move, their whole arm is immobilized, it's comfortable for them and it's safe. You're not twisting their arm behind their back to the point that they can't move, you're simply keeping them comfortable and safe. One time there was a situation like this There was a patient, she's a sister, and she's very, very violent during the ruqya. And what happened was, me and the brother, we got into a bit of a disagreement, my ruqya partner, over whether we should touch her or not. And he said, no, leave her until she becomes violent and then touch her. And I said, I think you should restrain her from the beginning. And what happened was, subhanAllah, that this sister went so crazy and so physical and started to attack herself and others that she had to be wrestled to the ground. Now, if you imagine wrestling this sister to the ground involved touching her considerably to wrestle someone to the ground. Now, you could have avoided that by simply keeping a little bit of pressure on her shoulder, by maybe immobilizing her arm, or even simply by not touching her at all and keeping her in a seat where she can't move. So these are things that you need to be aware of. Ya ikhwan. If the sister attacks you, you may need to touch her to the extent that is necessary, not beyond that. Always, always, always err on the side of caution. But there is a time when sometimes you can be too cautious, like in the example where we both refrained from it. We knew she was extremely violent, we both refrained from it, and then she hurt herself quite badly being restrained onto the floor because we didn't take the lighter or the lesser of the two evils and restrain her lightly to begin with. The way that you touch, subhanallah, you don't have to touch her in intimate parts. And this happens on some of the ruqa. You simply, if you want to keep her in one place, you might just simply put some pressure on her shoulder. Again, I'm not an expert in this, but some brothers have shown me some techniques that are for brothers and sisters that are nice, comfortable ways you can keep the person restrained in a comfortable, safe way. You're trying to help them, not to harm them. Yeah, you want to keep them nice and comfortable. So those two situations are a primary example. She self-harms, she starts to punch herself in the face, she runs for the kitchen knife, or she begins to harm you and to attack people around you. Again, leave it for the mahram. The mahram deals with it, no problem. Bring 2 mahrams next time. Bring 3 next time. Make sure the kitchen knives are locked away next time. You may avoid yourself doing it, but there may be circumstances where qaddar Allah wa ma sha'a fa'al, you put yourself in a situation and you got stuck. And you had to do it to the minimum extent necessary. So think about where you're touching. You don't have to touch her bare skin. You could touch over her abaya in a way that's a bit more closer to the limits. And you're getting, you're trying to fear Allah. The third circumstance, and this is the tricky one and the grey area, and this is the one that I advise you to fear Allah in until you develop a great deal of experience and knowledge in this field. There may be times when you genuinely believe that you need to touch her in order, or that there is a considerable benefit to her in you touching her in performing her cure. This is a rare circumstance. You can read the Quran, it's enough for you. But you may see the jinn develop in one place and come up like a lump, and you feel that if you were to put pressure on that, then you would be able to significantly increase her cure, or to make her cure significantly quicker. The example of this, and the mashayikh have given this as a fatwa from the lajna and from other than those of the mashayikh, is that your example is the example of a doctor. When you need to do something, you have the permissibility to do it. But do not take that as a license. So many people say, why have you got hold of her? Well, it's important for her cure. It's not. You can recite the Quran. There may be a 1 in 1,000 time when you genuinely, in your heart of hearts, you genuinely believe that you need to touch this sister, and the mahram is not there, there's another sister with her, or the mahram's trying. This is almost a theoretical situation rather than a practical one. It almost never happens. But there may be, and you mentioned the fatwa of the ulama, that you're the example of a doctor, and if you need to do something to bring about someone's cure, you need to do it. But you fear Allah in this regard. How many sisters, subhanAllah, have come to us, and I know Abu Ibrahim is the same, and said, I've come to you because I used to go to so-and-so and he used to touch me. And sometimes you're shy and you say, sister, explain what you mean he used to touch you. He used to grab your arm to stop you hitting yourself. He used to touch me intimately. And he used to say the jinn is in your private parts, the jinn is here, the jinn is there, and I'm following the jinn around the body, and I'm just like a doctor. If your GP did this to you, what would your GP happen to the GP? SubhanAllah. Fear Allah with regard to the women. Very, very, very important point, ya ikhwan. Keep the mahram awake. Do not allow khalwa to develop. Khalwa is when you and the woman are alone. Why would you not want khalwa to develop? The Prophet ﷺ said, no man and woman are alone together except the third of them is who? Shaitan. Do you want any more shayateen there in your ruqya session? You've already got plenty to deal with as it is. So don't allow the shaitan to be a third. Keep yourself in a situation where you're controlled. And as I said, you may touch a woman one time because of a need and a necessity. And later on you may say, I can put practices in place that will stop this happening again. Maybe I can keep her a little comfortable. Maybe I can invite a second mahram. Keep the mahram awake. If the mahram dozes off, give him a bit of ruqya water in the face. Keep the mahram awake, yeah? In all seriousness, keep the mahram awake. To nudge him, bro, habibi, don't go to sleep. Because the mahram maybe has a weakness, maybe the shaitan looks to affect him, because the shaitan knows, if you're upon the sunnah, he knows. If he gets the mahram, you're going to leave. So he may try to attack the mahram, and then you need to keep the mahram awake, and at all times you need to keep the patient safe and comfortable, ya ikhwan. Safe and comfortable. Be professional about it. You know, think about this in terms of a hospital, in terms of a doctor. Keep the patient safe and comfortable. Don't allow them to hurt themselves. Don't allow them to choke on their own tongue. Don't allow them to hurt others. Be sensible, be professional. If you can get some knowledge from the ulum of the dunya, the knowledge of the dunya that will help in terms of safe restraining, in terms of, we call it jinjitsu, in terms of safe restraining, in terms of medical treatment to keep someone safe, how to put someone in recovery position, how to make sure someone's airway isn't being blocked by their tongue. These kind of things, it's a beneficial knowledge that you can learn and you can implement in your ruqya to make sure your patients are safe and comfortable at all times. For the last, I guess, few points, inshallah ta'ala, what I'm going to do is hand it over to our brother Abu Ibrahim, Allah yahfaduh, to inshallah conclude on this session and maybe also talk a little bit about what you do after the session and how you bring it to a close. In general, all I'll mention in bringing it to a close is, in general, 10-15 minutes a person usually needs to be observed at the end of the ruqya to ensure that they are okay with themselves and that they are sort of comfortable, and that's probably something that you should bear in mind. When you've come to a conclusion, you've finished what you'd already decided before that you were going to recite, and you're happy with the conclusion, you bring it to a conclusion, you stop it there, and you're going to observe the person for a short period of time, perhaps 10-15 minutes, to make sure that they are okay, that they're healthy, that the jinn has let go of them, and that you're going to be able to take them away safely. Be careful if they're driving themselves home. You may want to make that considerably longer time. If they're driving themselves home, be so careful that you don't put the person in a state where they're going to harm themselves. So inshallah, to talk about some more points and maybe how to conclude the ruqya session, and I guess maybe a little bit about what we do when the jinn, or how do we know when the jinn leaves, or what happens when the jinn leaves, I'm going to hand it over to our brother Abu Ibrahim, hafidhahullah ta'ala.